Then the true night, perilous too, but sweet to him who knows it, who can open to it like the flower to the sun, who himself is night, day and night. No, there's not much to be said for the night either, but compared to the day, there's much to be said for it. And notably compared to the morning, there's everything to be said for it. For the night purge is in the hands of technicians for the most part. They do nothing else. The bulk of the population have no part in it, preferring their warm beds, all things considered. Day is the time for lynching, for sleep is sacred, and especially the morning, between breakfast and lunch. My first care then, after a few miles in the desert dawn, was to look for a place to sleep, for sleep too is a kind of protection, strange as it may seem. For sleep, if it excites the lust to capture, seems to appease the lust to kill. There and then and bloodily, any hunter will tell you that. For the monster on the move or on the watch, lurking in his lair, there is no mercy, whereas he taken unawares in his sleep may sometimes get the benefit of milder feelings, which deflect the barrel, sheathe the kriss. For the hunter is weak at heart and sentimental, overflowing with repressed treasures of gentleness and compassion. And it is thanks to this sweet sleep of terror or exhaustion that many a foul beast and worthy of extermination can live on till he dies in the peace and quiet of our zoological gardens, broken only by the innocent laughter, the knowing laughter of children and their elders on Sundays and bank holidays. And I, for my part, have always preferred slavery to death. I mean being put to death. For death is a condition I have never been able to conceive to my satisfaction, and which therefore cannot go down in the ledger of weal and woe. Whereas my notions on being put to death inspired me with confidence, rightly or wrongly, and I felt I was entitled to act on them in certain emergencies. Oh, they weren't notions like yours, they were notions like mine, all spasm, sweat, and trembling, without an atom of common sense or lucidity. But they were the best I had. Yes, the confusion of my ideas on the subject of death was such that I sometimes wondered, believe me or not, if it wasn't a state of being even worse than life. So I found it natural not to rush into it, and when I forgot myself to the point of trying to stop in time, it's my only excuse. So I crawled into some hole somewhere, I suppose, and waited, half sleeping, half sighing, groaning and laughing or feeling my body to see if anything had changed, for the morning frenzy to abate. Then I resumed my spirals. And as to saying what became of me and where I went in the months and perhaps the years that followed, no. For I, weary of these inventions and others, beckoned to me. But in order to blacken a few more pages, may I say I spent some time at the seaside without incident. There are people the sea doesn't suit who prefer the mountains or the plain. Personally, I feel no worse there than anywhere else. Much of my life has ebbed away before this shivering expanse, to the sound of the waves in storm and calm, and the claws of the surf. Before, no, more than before, one with spread on the sand or in a cave. In the sand I was in my element, letting it trickle between my fingers, scooping holes that I filled in a moment later, or that filled themselves in, flinging it in the air by handfuls, rolling in it. And in the cave, lit by the beacons at night, I knew what to do in order to be no worse off than elsewhere. And that my land went no further, in one direction at least, did not displease me, and to feel there was one direction at least in which I could go no further without first getting wet, then drowned, was a blessing. For I have always said, first learn to walk, then you can take swimming lessons. But don't imagine my region ended at the coast. That would be a grave mistake. For it was this sea too, its reefs and distant lands and its hidden depths. And I too once went forth in it, and I too once went forth on it, in a sort of oarless skiff, but I paddled with an old bit of driftwood, and I sometimes wonder if I ever came back from that voyage, for if I see myself putting to sea, and the long hours without landfall, I do not see the return, the tossing on the breakers, and I do not hear the frail keel grating on the shore. I took advantage of being at the seaside to lay in a store of sucking stones. They were pebbles, but I called them stones. Yes, on this occasion I laid in a considerable store. I distributed them equally among my 4 pockets, and sucked them turn and turn about. This raised a problem which I first solved in the following way. I had, say, 16 stones, 4 in each of my 4 pockets, these being the 2 pockets of my trousers and the 2 pockets of my greatcoat. Taking a stone from the right pocket of my greatcoat and putting it in my mouth, I replaced it in the right pocket of my greatcoat by a stone from the right pocket of my trousers, which I replaced by a stone from the left pocket of my trousers, which I replaced by a stone from the left pocket of my greatcoat, which I replaced by the stone which was in my mouth, as soon as I had finished sucking it. Thus, there were still 4 stones in each of my 4 pockets, but not quite the same stones. And when the desire to suck took hold of me again, I drew again on the right pocket of my greatcoat, certain of not taking the same stone as the last time. And while I sucked it, I rearranged the other stones in the way I've just described, and so on. But this solution did not satisfy me fully, for it did not escape me that by an extraordinary hazard, the 4 stones circulating thus might always be the same 4. In which case, far from sucking the 16 stones turn and turn about, I was really only sucking 4, always the same turn and turn about. But I shuffled them well in my pockets before I began to suck, and again while I sucked before transferring them in the hope of obtaining a more general circulation of the stones from pocket to pocket. But this was only a makeshift that could not long content a man like me, so I began to look for something else. And the first thing I hit upon was that I might do better to transfer the stones 4 by 4 instead of 1 by 1, that is to say, during the sucking, to take the 3 stones remaining in the right pocket of my greatcoat and replace them by the 4 in the right pocket of my trousers, and these by the 4 in the left pocket of my trousers, and these by the 4 in the left pocket of my greatcoat, and finally these by the 3 from the right pocket of my greatcoat, plus the 1 as soon as I had finished sucking it, which was in my mouth. Yes, it seemed to me at first that by so doing I would arrive at a better result, but on further reflection I had to change my mind and confess that the circulation of the stones 4 by 4 came to exactly the same thing as their circulation 1 by 1. For if I was certain of finding each time in the right pocket of my greatcoat 4 stones totally different from their immediate predecessors, the possibility nevertheless remained of my always chancing on the same stone within each group of 4, and consequently of my sucking not the 16 turn and turn about as I wished, but in fact 4 only, always the same turn and turn about. So I had to seek elsewhere than in the mode of circulation, for no matter how I caused the stones to circulate, I always ran the same risk. It was obvious that by increasing the number of my pockets, I was bound to increase my chances of enjoying my stones in the way I planned, that is to say, one after the other until their number was exhausted. Had I had 8 pockets, for example, instead of the 4 I did have, then even the most diabolical hazard could not have prevented me from sucking at least 8 of my 16 stones turn and turn about. The truth is, I should have needed 16 pockets in order to be quite easy in my mind, and for a long time I could see no other conclusion than this. That short of having 16 pockets, each with its stone, I could never reach the goal I had set myself short of an extraordinary hazard. And if at a pitch I could double the number of my pockets, were it only by dividing each pocket in 2 with the help of a few safety pins, let us say, to quadruple them seemed to be more than I could manage. And I did not feel inclined to take all that trouble for a half measure, for I was beginning to lose all sense of measure after all this wrestling and wrangling, and to say all or nothing, and if I was tempted for an instant to establish a more equitable proportion between my stones and my pockets by reducing the former to the number of the latter, it was only for an instant, for it would have been an admission of defeat. And sitting on the shore, before the sea, the 16 stones spread out before my eyes, I gazed at them in anger and perplexity. For just as I had difficulty in sitting on a chair or in an armchair because of my stiff leg, you understand, so I had none in sitting on the ground because of my stiff leg and my stiffening leg, for it was about this time that my good leg, good in the sense that it was not stiff, began to stiffen. I needed a prop under the ham, you understand, and even under the whole length of the leg, the prop of the earth. And while I gazed thus at my stones, revolving interminable martingales, all equally defective, and crushing handfuls of sand, so that the sand ran through my fingers and fell back on the strand, yes, while thus I lulled my mind and part of my body, one day suddenly it dawned on the former, dimly, that I might perhaps achieve my purpose without increasing the number of my pockets or reducing the number of my stones, but simply by sacrificing the principle of trim. The meaning of this illumination, which suddenly began to sing within me like a verse of Isaiah or of Jeremiah, I did not penetrate at once, and notably the word trim, which I had never met with in this sense, long remained obscure. Finally, I seemed to grasp that this word trim could not here mean anything else, anything better than the distribution of the 16 stones in 4 groups of 4, 1 group in each pocket, and that it was my refusal to consider any distribution other than this that had vitiated my calculations until then and rendered the problem literally insoluble. And it was on the basis of this interpretation, whether right or wrong, that I finally reached a solution, inelegant assuredly, but sound. Now I am willing to believe, indeed I firmly believe, that other solutions to this problem might have been found, and indeed may still be found, no less sound but much more elegant than the one I shall now describe, if I can. And I believe too that had I been a little more insistent, a little more resistant, I could have found them myself. But I was tired, and I contented myself ingloriously with the first solution that was a solution to this problem.